Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I drop the kids off at school and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, greetings listeners. It is Tuesday, May 29th. It's a nice day today, not too hot yet. I guess it's only 8:10 in the morning, so it could get pretty warm. It's been pretty warm over the weekend, so the summer has definitely arrived here in suburban Chicago. I'm walking home from dropping the kids off at school, and I thought I'd talk to you about the next 10 games on my top 50 list. Now, if you've been listening, you know that I've already covered games 50 through 21, which means that today begins our top 20. I would say all of these games are games I would gladly play pretty much anytime someone suggested it, and I am keen to play them again. There might be a couple on here that have limited play times, but generally. Okay, here we go. Number 20, another Martin Wallace game. This might be the third or fourth on the list. Gee, you didn't know I was a Martin Wallace fanboy. This is The Arrival, a Martin Wallace game from a couple years ago. There's a couple things I like about this. One, it again has a weird win condition where if you take advantage of these evil Fomori creatures too much, if you bring them onto the board too much, then they overtake the board and you lose because you have the bad reputation. So if you don't ever use them, you have a good reputation, and then you can win in that condition, but you might lose because other people who do use them get the power from them. So The Arrival is interesting that way. It also has a really neat resource allocation mechanism that I enjoy quite a bit. So the way it works is you have a deck of cards, and each card has on it 3 rows of resources. And the rows of resources are marked with a couple icons to give you an idea of what's in them, but not the specifics. So you know this one might give you soldiers, this one might give you buildings, this one might give you Fomori or whatever. And generally the top is the most aggressive, the middle is sort of middle of the road, the bottom is most peaceful or least Fomori driven. So you lay the cards out, and you lay 2 of the cards out, and there's 3 rows on the cards. And you take this blocking stone, this blocking circle, and you pick one of the rows that are on the cards that you're not going to take. So you're kind of canceling out that row, which leaves 2 to pick from. Then you get dealt another card and you look at that one, and then you pick another row that you're not going to take, which locks you into the last row. Then you get dealt the last card and flip those over, and those are your resources. You have 4 cards worth of resources, but you only get 1 row of those resources. I think I'm giving you the idea. I might not be exactly right on some of the numbers, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Anyway, so you get these resources that you kind of pick randomly, but you kind of know what you're getting, and then you deploy them you take turns, and it's an area control game. So the idea is that you're trying to control medieval Ireland or prehistoric Ireland, where there's these evil fae creatures that are coming in and sort of overwhelming the humans. So you're trying to push them back and take control of the board. I like it quite a bit. That's The Arrival by Martin Wallace. I have the first edition, so it's possible that the Whiz Kids edition might have slightly different rules, but I think it's pretty much the same. That was my number 20, The Arrival. Number 19, Legacy Gears of Time. This is an older game from Floodgate, designer Ben Harkins, and it's a time travel game where you're trying to reverse engineer history so that you and your group are in control of history. So the way it works is each round you start in the present day, and you get to move backwards in time and place these influence cubes that you use to create historical events. And the person who has the most influence cube on a card controls that card and gets the benefits from having those events. The thing is, if nobody puts influence cubes on a card, then it goes away and the event doesn't exist. The other way to make a card go away is to go back further in time and invent it earlier. So I could go back like 2 eras and invent plumbing, and then from plumbing someone else could build, I don't know, refrigerators. And then on your next turn you could go back to the 3rd era back and you could invent plumbing instead, and then my invention of plumbing is erased because it was already invented, and then you get all the benefits of plumbing. And the way that the benefits flow is that any technology that depends on a previous technology scores points for the person who did that previous technology. So for example, if you invent plumbing, maybe you get 3 points for inventing plumbing, and then if I'm the one who invented refrigeration, I get 3 points for refrigeration and you get 1 point because refrigeration depends on plumbing. So there's this interesting influence thing, and each round you're able to go further back, and so there's more to deal with, and you get more cubes, but you never have quite enough cubes to keep everything that you want in play. And the more cubes you put down, the less you have to tend to something, but because the cubes go away one per round. So if you put like 3 cubes on something, you've got a couple rounds before your influence dwindles and it vanishes. But there's constant negotiation of, do I want to keep that technology in play? Do I want to get rid of it? And there's a few high technologies that you really want the points for, but they require a whole bunch of technologies in the prehistoric age to get. On top of that, in order to put anything into play, you're constantly discarding cards. So you're constantly making choices between different technologies that you want. It's a really interesting and fun game that doesn't get a lot of love. In fact, it makes me want to play it again. I think I'm going to stop saying that because I'll feel that way about every game on this list. Anyway, that is Legacy Gears of Time, number 19 from Floodgate Games. My number 18 is Dungeon Lords by Vlaada Chvátil. Dungeon Lords is a game that I do not have a copy of, although my buddy Rob does, so it's in our game group and I can play it without too much effort. Dungeon Lords is an interesting game where you play an evil dungeon lord and you're trying to set up a terrible dungeon that will murder heroes when they come inside. The thing is, 3 times during the game the heroes come in, or twice during the game, the heroes come into your dungeon and wreak havoc. And if you haven't planned carefully for the heroes that are coming adventuring, then they just trash your dungeon and then you're stuck without anything good for the next round. It's a cute and funny game. It's got worker placement, it's got tons of theme. There's things like if you have a dragon character, they can't go in the lunchroom, which is where all the monsters eat, because dragons have very bad manners, for example. So a really funny game, interesting, super thinky, surprisingly competitive because the spaces are tough to get and you have to think carefully about when you take them, because often the first person to take a particular worker space gets the least benefit from it, depending on which. For some of the spaces, if you're the first one to take it, you get the least benefits. You actually want to take it second or third, but if you're taking it fourth, there's no fourth spot, so you don't get it at all. And so it's really interesting and thinky, a nice companion piece to Dungeon Pets. That's Dungeon Lords, my number 18 from Czech Games Edition. Number 17 is a much maligned game, which I don't understand why it's much maligned, and that's SeaFall from Rob Davio and Plaid Hat Games. SeaFall is a legacy game about seafaring adventurers. You are building up a ship and exploring islands. There's rules to read and stickers to apply, and I really like it. I've played several of the games. We're probably 5 games into our campaign, and the couple that I play with, we all have a rip-roaring good time with it. So it makes me sad that it's not more beloved. That's SeaFall. Strongly recommended. I enjoyed it, especially given how poorly it was received. Copies are dirt cheap. You should be able to get it really inexpensively, and it's worth a try at that rate. The one caution, of course, because it's a legacy game, if you start playing it and you don't like it, it's pretty hard to sell because you've played it some and you've torn off stickers and you've labeled cards and that sort of thing. So, but I enjoy it quite a bit. So number 17, SeaFall. My number 16, Terraforming Mars. This should not be a surprise from anyone. That's from Frixilius Games. I think Jacob Frixilius or Jacob Frixus, something like that, is the main designer, and published by Stronghold in the United States. Terraforming Mars is a game about, as the title suggests, changing Mars to be more like Earth. It's really thematic, card-driven play, where you are managing resources and altering the board and competing with one another to grab a variety of spots. It's really good. I strongly recommend playing it. Very interesting, a game I'd like to play more of. The one downside is it runs pretty long from my experience, and so not a short game. They've been releasing a bunch of expansions for it. I have the first one, the one that gives you different moons, and I plan on picking up the others eventually, but it's been low on my priority list because I just don't get to play it very much. So that's number 16, Terraforming Mars. Number 15, Orléans. This might be the highest game on my list. Oh, not quite. I was going to say the highest game on my list that I've only played once, but I have 3 more. So, because I heard Crystal on Boardgame Blitz talk about this. She's like, sometimes when you play a game, it just grabs you and you know it's a favorite of yours, even if you've only played it once. And that's true for me. There are a lot of thinky games where I just know playing them. Like, this game is awesome and I totally want to play this a bunch more. But because I play widely and less deeply than I should, I have a lot of games that fit that niche that I don't play that often. And Orléans is one of these. I played it at Origins last year and I really enjoyed it. It's a bag building worker placement game. Very thinky, but sufficiently competitive in terms of where you're grabbing spots from other people. There's a couple different mechanisms that are really fun. I played it at Origins and immediately went and bought it. I haven't played it since, which makes me sad, in part because, again, my wife doesn't like the theme. But it's definitely a game I need to get back to the table. That's Orléans, number 15. By designer, I don't know. You'd think I would know more of these designers, but there it is. My number 14 game is an interesting card drafting game. I guess you could call it card drafting when you draft from a tableau rather than a hand. It's still drafting. Called Elysium. Now, this game got a ton of coverage the year it came out, which I think was 2015. And then it kind of disappeared, which is a bummer. It is a really neat game. It's a game where you are collecting Greek figures and they interact with one another in interesting ways to get you glory points, and your goal is to have the most points at the end of the game to win. The game comes with 9 different decks, but only 5 of them are used in any given game, so you get a variety. The rulebook comes with this lovely suggestions for combinations of decks that give you a different kind of gameplay. And we've tried those, and that's really fun. The one downside is all the cards do different things. So if you're playing with new people, it takes a long time because you have to say what all the cards do, and then it's really hard to make decisions. And it's got this really interesting selection mechanism, though, where every card has on it depictions of some colorful rings. And every round you have to you can get a ring. Every round you can recruit from the cards where you still have the rings or ring depicted on the cards. And then you have to discard one of your little podiums. You get these 4 little pedestals, and they are in the colors of the 4 rings. And so you have to discard one of your pedestals each round. And when you do that, then you are no longer able to recruit from that color. So there's a lot of planning ahead and looking at what other people have done. Once everyone else has discarded their yellow one, you maybe want to hold on to your yellow one because you're the only one who can get the card that have just yellow rings on them, that sort of thing. It's really interesting, and I think it makes for spicy gameplay in a way that I haven't really seen that much of otherwise. That's Elysium. I think the publisher is Space Cowboys. It's also a lovely production, beautiful art. Each set of cards from a particular god. I'm walking under 1,000 birds here, so sorry about all the chirping. Each set of cards that depict a certain god have a particular art style. That works really well. And they have one artist who does all of the cards for a particular god. So, really an interesting game, worth checking out. That's Elysium, my number 14. All right, 3 more to go, one of which goes in my only played once category. So number 13 is a game I've only played once, but I loved it. I immediately wanted to play it again, and of course, didn't get it to the table. And that's Trickerion, Legends of Illusion. So Trickerion is a game from Mind Clash Games, a favorite of mine in terms of publishing companies. They produce really lovely games with nice graphic design and elaborate sets of icons to allow you to do all sorts of weird things. So Trickerion has a weird plot about being the best magician or something. It's themed around the Victorian age, and in it you are building elaborate magic tricks and performing on stage. There's some really interesting specialized worker placement and resource management stuff that's just different than anything else I've played. Really thought-provoking and interesting, and worth a look if you haven't checked it out. That's Trickerion, my number 13. Number 12 is a game I've played a handful of times. I really like it, and it's actually in my 10 for 10 list, so I really want to get it played 10 times this year, although I have yet to break it out. It's the sort of game that once you're playing it regularly, you can play it pretty fast. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes. That's the Carl Chudyk game, Mottainai. Mottainai is often recognized as Chudyk's perhaps strongest follow-up to Glory to Rome, although I've heard that said also about Innovation and Impulse, neither of which I have. So maybe he's just very good at making games that feel like follow-ups to Glory to Rome. But in Mottainai, you are running a gift shop at a Buddhist monastery, which is a kind of unusual theme, I think, but generally very enjoyable. And the idea is you are managing the monks at the monastery who keep track of, or who make the things that are for sale in the monastery. You are choosing what things they make. You're managing the resources they use to make those things. You are manipulating the people in the shop. There's all these different things you do, and the thing is you do that all with cards. So there's these cards you have, there's a pot in the middle that has all the cards everybody could get, and then on your turn you do a variety of actions, and when you do them, then you get to replicate, or you get to do that action. And often the action involves discarding cards in order to do things. So if you want to build a thing, you have to discard the cards related to that thing, and then they go into this mess in the middle, and your opponent can get them. Since all the cards are dual or triple purpose, you might be giving your opponent exactly the thing they need. Also, a lot of the things you build have these crazy powers. So once you build them, then you have these very effective things you can do with the cards that you build. Now, it's really fun. It's very complex. It's a game that takes longer to teach than it does to play. It's over in about 25 or 30 minutes. I think it's just the right length, too, because some of the cards are crazy powerful. So you read them and you're like, wait, you get to do that? That's sick. And then you realize the card you just put into play is equally sick. So from that perspective, it's fun. But because it's 20 minutes long or 30 minutes long, if somebody starts to get really ahead, well, then they win and it's over. It's not like you're getting pounded in the dirt for an hour and a half. It's very thinky because every card is different, or there's like 2 copies of each card, I think. There's lots of different ways you can approach the game, and you make that decision in the first couple rounds depending on what cards you have available to you. It's really good. It's the kind of game where you're playing it, you realize that you just won't ever find the bottom of the depth of the game. But because of that, I really like it. An intriguing, thoughtful game. That's Mottainai, my number 12. Finally, my number 11. I've mentioned this game a few times on the podcast. This is not the newest Uwe Rosenberg game, but one of the newest, and that's A Feast for Odin. A Feast for Odin is a worker placement game in which you are manipulating resources, you're turning resources into other resources, and then you're putting them on this board that is covered with icons and numbers. Your goal is to fill up the board as much as you can, and in doing so, then you get money, which you can use to do other things, and you have to feed your people each round, and it's filled with all sorts of Viking lore. The game has a worker placement board where you can do different actions, and there's 60 actions on the board, which sounds overwhelming, but they're very easily organized and easily digested. So after 1 or 2 rounds, you're no longer thinking, oh my god, there's 60 choices, but rather, now there's only 3 I want to do this round, and I can decide which of those 3 is most important to me. really fulfilling, really interesting. Again, a game I've only played a couple times because it's also very deep. But that's A Feast for Odin by Uwe Rosenberg, my number 11. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. So I hope that you've enjoyed this and you are continuing to enjoy it. I would love to hear what you think. What are your number 20 through 11? Which of the games I've suggested do you dislike? Which do you like a lot? Which should I do better at? Which should I take off my list and never play again? All of those are interesting things I'd like to know about, and I'd love to hear from you about them. You can reach me on Boardgame Geek, Guild 3269. You can reach out via Twitter at Rattlebox Games, or through any of the other social medias at Rattlebox Games. You can also check out our show notes at rattleboxgames.com, where you can email me, Brendan at rattleboxgames, although I will probably get back to you slowly because that's the way I roll. Well, thanks for listening, and I hope that it's not getting too hot where you are, but at whatever temperature it is, I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Thanks for listening. Bye. Just you wait, just you wait. My name is Alexander Hamilton. My name is Alexander Hamilton. There's a million things I haven't done. Just you wait, just you wait.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.